Penn State just put itself in position to shock the likes of Oregon, Texas A&M, among others, to potentially land one of the best prospects in the entire nation.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football recruiting. And thank you so much, as always, for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day, the #1 Penn State sports podcast out there. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am your host of the show. That is Dylan Callaghan-Croley, recruiting insider over at Penn State Rivals. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Friendly reminder, let us know your thoughts down in the comments section. Be a part of the conversation as we are talking about the latest linebacker commitment. Dan Connor is red hot. 2 linebacker commits in 3 days, but we got to focus on 5-star prospect Brandon Arrington. Finished up his OV in Happy Valley this past weekend. Penn State made some strides. They get the first crack at this recruitment with his official visit. I like where Penn State stands personally. I think they made a strong impression here. Oregon, Texas A&M, they're kind of the presumed favorites in this recruitment. Georgia and Bama, at least at this time, don't have an official visit lined up. But Dylan, I like the impression that Penn State made, and I think they increased their chances at landing Arrington, to say the least.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that statement. I think our early intel that we've gathered through our own sources, but also now with the acquisition of Rivals from On3, that is also has allowed us to gain some more intel from Steve Wolfong over on the On3 side of things. And definitely Penn State did really, really good with Brandon Arrington this weekend, and they definitely increased their chances of landing Arrington down the road. My only concern here is that while it was a fantastic visit, that has definitely propelled their chances higher to land him. I fear that the visit may have come too early in the official visit process for Arrington.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I think let me frame it this way, because I want to ask about that. Because that next official visit isn't until early June, and then it's all consecutive. I look at it as Arrington now has a month to think about Penn State and this opportunity unfiltered. That there's no follow-up influence from Georgia or Alabama. Sure, they're probably going to have ongoing conversations, but an actual visit, a weekend devoted to said university. Oregon's got to wait their turn. Texas A&M's got to wait their turn. So I'm interested in the fact that you think that's a negative. I actually think it kind of helps them, but that's my point of view.
Yeah, no, my thing is yes, next visit right now, Texas A&M on June 6th. Also has Bama, USC, Oregon on the schedule. But yes, a month that he can sit on this one. But that's also a month that, he's going to come down off that post-visit high from Penn State.
It's fair.
That gives a month for everybody else to really gain momentum back their way. And then once he visits those other schools, he isn't unless he commits to Penn State and comes back for an unofficial visit or comes back for an unofficial visit this fall, there's no avenue for him to come back really this summer, unless I guess Lash Bash, it could be one of those things.
That would be massive. If he's still uncommitted at that point, they need to get him in for the Lash Bash.
If he's still uncommitted, I remember there's potential recruiting calendar changes, but I have to go back and look at those too. But nonetheless, after those official visits that are coming up in June, they potentially won't be able to get him back on campus before he makes a decision. So if he's coming off those USC and Oregon visits and, the Ducks and Trojans had really good visits just like Penn State, the more recent official visits may play into favor of the Trojans or Ducks. The Aggies are still in there. I think Penn State is firmly in the mix for Arrington. I think they really do have a great chance of not a great chance. I think they have a better chance of landing him than they did coming into this past weekend. But it is going to be, I think, tough to outlast those big three official visits in A&M, USC, Oregon. Not going to rule out the Crimson Tide, but those are the three of the ones that we've been hearing the most about in this recruitment.
Mm-hmm. Does USC even have room for him at this point? They have 27 commits at the time of this conversation.
Yeah, that's a fair caution.
I don't see USC. He's from California. I don't see USC as an actual contender in this recruitment because they would have made him a priority. I don't know exactly what their plans are, but when I look at, okay, when you have about 25 commits, eventually you're going to have to start thinking, there's the transfer portal. I completely understand that you can just, you make your roster adjustments that way by pushing out players that you don't see as fit into your roster anymore. So fine, that's what Lincoln Riley wants to do. But at some point, spots fill up. Oregon and Texas A&M, I view them as the perennial favorites for, a variety of reasons here. Yeah. But as you've mentioned, Penn State's right in the mix. What you and I have heard about, hey, how this visit actually went, that Penn State's not this long shot. And I do find it intriguing that at this point in time, Georgia and Alabama, they are in his top 6 as well, are not scheduled for official visits at this point unless, Dylan, something has magically changed here. But those are the 4 schools that actually get a tangible official visit, not Georgia, not Bama.
Right. And I just want to go back to my whole point here is I think if this official visit came, I think being the first official visit these days is very beneficial. I think this official visit came like the May 30th weekend, which appears to still be open for him, and they had this stronger visit, that would have been huge. Now, you can also say, get him up on the May 2nd official visit weekend. He was the only official visitor. So, I mean, that could be very beneficial, right? It's just, even though he had such a great official visit, even though they did a great job of increasing their chance to land him, just the time between now and a potential decision, which probably looking maybe sometime in July. I have no clue on a deadline, a timeline right now, but let's say sometime in July. You're talking probably 2+ months from that official visit to Penn State for him to make a potential decision. That's a long time, especially when you consider he's going to make a couple other official visits in the meantime. And let's not beat around the bush here. Oregon, USC, Alabama, Oregon, USC, Alabama, Texas A&M, those 4 schools have one big thing in common, and that's they can throw around the bag a little bit. So, I mean, Penn State's NIL is definitely in a better situation than it was a couple of years ago. I think Penn State's NIL is very competitive on the grand scheme of things on the national landscape, definitely one of the better NIL situations nationally, even if, you may hear different. You're always going to, I think, hear a little bit, still need more, because that is the truth. Always going to need more NIL. They're never going to be on that level of Oregon probably, or Texas A&M or Ohio State, but still a very competitive NIL spot for Penn State. Are they able to match potentially the NIL packages that he's going to be able to get from A&M, USC, Oregon? Is NIL the most important? I mean, these are things that are going to decide this long term, obviously. But just a lot of factors that will still determine this recruitment are there. And, there's still a long ways to go in this one. It's still over a month and a half. So I do think Penn State did a great job. I do think, if this was a much closer to the rest of those official visits, Penn State would have a legitimate chance of landing him after this weekend. I'm just very timid about this layoff between official visits and a layoff between the official visit this weekend and a potential commitment date this summer.
Well, let's talk about it more. How the visit went, and Arrington as a prospect, because in some places he's listed as a cornerback. In other places he's listed as an athlete. What is his outlook? What would Penn State's plan be for him? Could he be a two-way athlete at Penn State? What was the pitch, or at least what we speculate the pitch was? That is coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live, even in the middle of the game with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And the latest lines for those NBA playoff games are available on FanDuel as we speak. For this tonight's game, the Cleveland Cavaliers are 9-point favorites against the Indiana Pacers, and the total is set at 229.5. The Golden State Warriors are on the road against Minnesota. They are 7-point underdogs to the Timberwolves, total set at 208.5. If you like those lines, you can go over to FanDuel.com and bet on them and so much more. And how about $200 in bonus bets to use to bet on those NBA playoff games? Well, if you are new to FanDuel, it's a perfect time to sign up because you can head over to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. That's right, $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. So by all accounts, the Arrington visit went very well. In the way that he was posting to social media, LeVar Arrington was active as well in this conversation. And just to clarify, LeVar Arrington and LeVar Arrington II have no familial relationship with Brandon Arrington, but the Arrington name attached to Penn State does have a nice ring to it. All things aside, Arrington seemed to enjoy himself. He was very public about it. So if this was kind of a hush-hush recruitment, I think I'd look at this a little bit differently here. I got to imagine that Penn State made the pitch to, because he's listed as a 5-star athlete. He's listed as a 5-star cornerback across the industry, generally speaking. Over at On3, it's cornerback. Over at Rivals, it's athlete. So he is a 5-star caliber prospect. Could he play both ways? Could he be effective at one or the other positions? I've made the argument, I like him as a wide receiver, but it seems like you can't go wrong either way, and that he's going to project as an elite playmaker regardless. So did Penn State make that pitch that you could play both sides of the football at the next level?
Yeah, we haven't learned too much about the pitch to Arrington just yet, but it wouldn't be surprising if that is, the pitch that they did make this week. And we know they're making a similar pitch to Joey O'Brien.
And Arrington's better. I think Arrington's better than O'Brien.
I think Arrington is. Joey O'Brien's a really good player, but Brandon Arrington is a top 10 player in this country and one of the best two-way players in this country. I think he could play both sides of the ball at the next level and be very good at it. I mean, the Travis Hunter thing the last few years definitely increased, coaching staffs making the two-way, recruiting sell to prospects. And then even in the Big Ten, we're seeing Minnesota starting to try to get Coy Parrish, their star safety, in on offense with the wide receiver room. He played a little bit there. He took a snap against Penn State last year at wide receiver, I believe. He practiced at wide receiver this spring for Minnesota.
It's the Travis Hunter effect, yeah.
Yeah, the Travis Hunter effect is real. Penn State's pitching that to Joey O'Brien. I wouldn't be surprised if they're pitching that to Brandon Arrington as well. He's a fantastic cornerback. He has the ability to be a potential lockdown corner at the next level. And as a wide receiver, I think his ceiling is just as high. He's somebody who can be a game changer at that position and really be a number one wide receiver in the Big Ten and be a dominant one at that. And we all know in the Big Ten, all the dominant wide receivers really right now reside in Columbus. Perhaps Penn State could find a 5-star of their own. Maybe that's Arrington. Maybe it's somebody else. But I definitely think he has the ability to play both ways at the next level if he wants to. But we'll have to try to learn more about what the pitch is to Arrington. If he's just a cornerback for Penn State, which, I think most schools are recruiting him as a cornerback, okay, I think he has a great chance to be a lockdown CB1 wherever he goes. And if Terry Smith and Penn State have their way, perhaps he'll be doing that in the blue and white come 2026.
My preference is wide receiver because you need all the help that you can get I think you might as well, because there is momentum here that Marcus Higgins has created here so far. So I would like to see him be two-way or play wide receiver at Penn State, but I'm not going to complain if he does happen to be a Nittany Lion that they use him and have him be a cornerback full time. Maybe they, some specialty offensive situations, they bring him in. Either way, you can't go wrong. That's the caliber of prospect that Arrington is, where Arrington can be. And, he's a good wide receiver, but he's an elite cornerback. Okay, then you know the answer to all of this. At this point in time, as I sit here, I don't necessarily know that I have an answer, because when you pull up his highlights immediately, it's him making plays as a wide receiver. So Arrington is versatile. I like when prospects are elite at two positions. That's why he's a 5-star in this conversation. But it allows them to gain the experience, the knowledge of, okay, what is my counterpart doing? And I made this point before, but I want to make it again, is that when you're a cornerback and you understand the ins and outs of being a wide receiver, that it's going to play into your favor when you go up in those matchups, regardless. Okay, if he's a cornerback, okay, well, he knows how to play wide receiver. If he's a wide receiver, he knows how to play cornerback. So Penn State, anybody, right? But we want to project him to Penn State for the sake of this conversation. You're getting somebody that's 6'3", probably going to add on some more weight and be 200 pounds when he's actually at the collegiate level. Aaron, that's perfect for covering the likes of a Jeremiah Smith. That build, right? That's your cornerback. That is your cornerback one, but it's also a mismatch. It's a nightmare when he's on the opposite end, as you see with Jeremiah Smith, when he is wide receiver one. So can't go wrong with it. Don't blame. And I would encourage Penn State to make the pitch that you can play both ways here in some capacity.
Yeah, those are all great points, Zach. Disagree with nothing you just said. I think Arrington, at the end of the day, is just one of those prospects that you do everything you can to get on campus and you figure out the position later. Yes, you can have an idea that you want him to play corner or you want him to play wide receiver. You want him to play both ways. But at the end of the day, he's just that level of player that you just do all you can to get him on campus. And then once he's on campus, you can figure out the position. Penn State, the one thing for certain, definitely strengthened their chances with him this weekend and have made things really interesting going into the rest of his official visits.
Well, enough speculation as far as Penn State recruiting goes. Again, Arrington's recruitment is going to carry on for a long time, but something that is certain right now is that Dan Connor is on fire. First year as the full-time linebackers coach, and he gets not one, but 2 linebacker commits in the span of 3 days. Mathieu Lamah, where he projects what he brings to Penn State now that he is in the class of 2026. We'll tell you about it more coming up here on Locked On Nittany Lions. This episode is brought to you by Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. And with Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and so much more. Experts who are ready to help take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. You'll find the right talent. If you need help with a marketing campaign, for example, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who's delivered incredible results. You'll get fast and easy hiring too. Posting a job is free and it's simple. And within a day, multiple qualified candidates will be available to choose from. You'll get cost-effective growth with Upwork. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps find affordable top-tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That is UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Mathieu Lamah becomes the second 4-star linebacker to commit to Penn State's class of 2026. Great work by Dan Connor. And I know he's been a defensive analyst for this time and working primarily, obviously, with the linebackers since he has the legacy at Penn State. You know, when you think of linebacker U and Penn State, one of the players that you think of is Dan Connor. So it's not shocking to see that he's a natural at this, but for him to get situated so quickly, you know, there's no buffer, there's no Manny Diaz, there's no Tom Allen. Yes, there's Jim Knowles, but now he's not an assistant anymore. This is his linebacker room. So for him to get Terry Wiggins, these are guys that they wanted. Okay, above all else, if you have a Penn State big board for recruits in the class of 2026, they get both now Terry Wiggins and Mathieu Lamah back to back like this in a span of 3 days. So that's what impresses me the most. If we have to compare and contrast, I mean, Wiggins and Lamah are built, and people might say, well, oh, you have his name wrong. That's Matthew Canoe. His name's actually Mathieu Lamah, just for the clarification's sake. Lamah is more of your prototypical middle linebacker, but the way he's built at 6'3", I think it is reported that he's 235 pounds currently. So at high school, going into a senior season, and he's already 235 pounds, because I think Wiggins was listed around 210, 215. So he'll have to grow into that frame. But they're both 6'3". Lamah particularly, your thumping middle linebacker that is great in run defense. He can cover as well. But there are two clear distinctions here between what Wiggins is going to give you is that your prototypical weak side linebacker, the guy that wears number 11. I know that him and Arrington will cross paths. I'm not trying to say he's taking the number 11 away, but that's where he projects. And then as your true traditional Mike linebacker, which Penn State needs more of at this present time, you get Lamah. So Penn State got two guys that they wanted in this class, both at the linebacker position. All is well right now for Penn State recruiting overall. They're really on a hot streak overall, and Dan Connor gets to contribute to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what you want to see from Dan Connor in his first full cycle as the linebackers coach. His top two linebacker targets in this class, arguably. I don't even think it's arguable. I think they are his top two linebacker targets, and he was able to get both guys to commit before official visits. Penn State led for both guys for pretty much their entire recruitments. And there was never really a doubt that Penn State was going to land either prospect. It was just a matter of when and not if. That's a credit to Dan Connor to get those across the finish line, because there's been plenty of recruits in the past that have seemed to be in that when, not if category that, Penn State never got to the when category, or the when part of their recruitment. It went from when to never, because the recruits either decided to take their time and lost their chance to commit to the program, or another program made enough of a push over a couple months to land that recruit. Now that could have been the case here, but Penn State kept on chipping away at both guys, even though they were comfortably in the lead in both recruitments for quite a while. And now both are going to be a part of this Penn State football program in the future. Dan Connor has two of his top linebacker targets in his first cycle. A really bang-up job from the first-year linebackers coach here in the 2026 recruiting cycle. And Penn State, is building a really, really nice recruiting class here in that 2026 cycle, especially defensively. A lot of high upside there. And Penn State's defense, with Jim Knowles leading the way, doesn't seem like it's going to be taking any steps backwards anytime soon.
And for people that are going to look at the industry rankings and say, okay, well, they're not highly rated as they should be, or that we would like to see them be, because I do believe that Wiggins and Lamah are both going to be prospects that are late risers in these recruiting rankings, and that's typically what we see. Because right now, Penn State has a top 10 2026 class. Things could change. I know that the likes, Texas isn't going to sit idly by, and other schools that the recruiting process, because we see that Penn State tries to wrap up these commitments, these recruitments fairly soon, especially if they want them. So if they want a prospect, they want to get a commitment from them as soon as possible. But they don't push. They don't say, if you're not ready, don't commit. But if you are ready, please do commit so that we can wrap things up and what have you. That's why Arrington's recruitment is so important. I look at this group and I say right now, okay, they're a fringe top 10 group. That is certainly the potential. Do I think this could be a top 5 2026 recruiting class? Probably not. They would need to land at least 3 5-stars. Do we believe that? Could Kevin Brown ultimately become a consensus 5-star? There's a possibility of that. Peyton Falzone, I would say, is somebody that also kind of falls into that category. But I look at this group and I say, okay, he's going to move up in the rankings. He's going to move up in the rankings. That's Lamah. That's Wiggins. That's Jasir Rogers. That's David Davis. That's Terry Wiggins. That's That's Peyton Falzone. That's Kevin Brown. Messiah Mickens should probably move back up with another quality season. So when you have about at least a half a dozen players that are going to move, Penn State very well should have at least internally the expectation that we can get around or at top 5. But I would say top 10 just becomes more of a certainty with what they're doing presently.
Absolutely. I think this recruiting class, this cycle, has the chance to be a absolute top 15 class. I'd be surprised if it fell outside the top 15.
Conservatively, yeah.
Yeah. Has a chance definitely to land in that top 10, depending on who they land the remainder of the cycle. But like you said, to get into that top, anything above, I'd say 7, they would probably have to land quite a few guys that we really don't have them projected to land right now. A lot of those higher 4-stars, 5-star talents. Now, they've pulled surprises in the past, and I'm not going to rule that out as a possibility. But there's definitely work to be done for them to really get into that probably top 7 recruiting classes at the end of the cycle. But I definitely feel good about this being a top 10, 15 class. And it's going to be just another class that Penn State can, and that makes it sound negative, but this is going to be another class that Penn State can continue to build success on. And, they've had plenty of success with this level of recruiting class in the past. I see no reason to believe that, that's going to change here soon.
And that'll do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Appreciate each and every one of you for checking out this show. Again, be a part of the conversation down in the comments section. If you are new to the show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. Also, check out the portal. Locked On's show devoted entirely to high school recruiting, and the transfer portal hosted by Brian Smith. But again, thank you so much to everyone for checking out this show. Dylan, thank you so much for the time, the conversation, the insight. Again, you can keep up with Dylan's work over at Penn State Rivals. Links to his work will be down in the description. I highly encourage everyone to check them out. Dylan, it's great to see you again, and always great to chat with you about Penn State football and recruiting.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. And hopefully we'll be talking soon and for many more months about Penn State football.